Welcome to Amplifying Recruitment. In this episode, I'm joined by Tim Bennett. Like many of us, Tim has fallen into the world of recruitment, and he teaches recruiters how to use AI effectively. In this episode, he shares the disruption, the three biggest shifts that we're likely to see over the next 12 months. He's going to share some of the biggest mistakes that he's seeing with recruiters right now, and he also shares some tools and tactics that you can be using in your business when it comes to your AI adoption. Tim, welcome to Amplifying Recruitment. For anyone that doesn't know you, could you do like a 45-second intro? Like, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. So my name's Tim Bennett. I run two companies, one called Powerhouse Digital, which is an AI-focused business looking at chatbots and AI training. And I also run a digital marketing agency as well, which is more of your traditional agency that has been around now for around about 15, 16 years, where we do all the traditional stuff of website build, social media marketing, software engineering, that kind of stuff. So
many guests we have on here are recruitment business founders and owners, and typically most people say they fell into recruitment. The same's it's probably pretty true for you as well, right? This wasn't an intentional move into the world of recruitment. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, I sort of got involved in the world of recruitment last year at the Recruitment Expo exhibition, where I was invited to come along and be a speaker and talk about prompt engineering. So I worked with a guy called Kalpesh Baxi, who's a great guy and has introduced me into this whole world of recruitment. And then since then, as a business, we've started to do a lot more with the likes of SThree and also parts of their organisation, where we're now talking to not just their teams but also their ecosystem as well.
With the likes of SThree and recruitment businesses you're working with, that's to upskill and increase their AI, I don't know, what literacy, like capability, like what are you doing with those guys?
So obviously we can't talk too much about the detail of what we do, but as training programs and as part of our AI literacy model, we feel it's really important to train exec teams, C-suite teams in businesses, and to make sure that they have a good foundational understanding of really what AI is all about right now. So, you know, what is an LLM? How do you speak in a correct way to a chatbot, whether it's Copilot or whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini? And really, you know, how then do we take that training and look for opportunities within the business to really educate our staff and make sure that they're also on this AI learning curve.
When we were talking before, like a few weeks ago, you said something on the phone. We were talking about the disruption piece. You said there's going to be three big shifts. Can we go through those? So the three things that I've written down that you said to me was, the first one was like transactional recruiter to a strategic advisor. I'm a massive fan of that. I've got my own thoughts on this, but I'd love to understand what that means for you. The second thing you said was AI, the disruption, the shift is going to be reshaping the hiring funnel. And then the third thing you said was the AI literacy piece. So if we just go through those one by one, that first bit, the transactional recruiter to strategic advisor, what does that actually mean?
There is a movement, a development through the introduction of AI into businesses, which means that there is a lot more software that companies can use now to do what previously would have been the transactional day-to-day functions, particularly in a hiring role or the running of a recruitment business. And that's changing because AI now can do a lot of those roles in certain areas of the business. And it just means that the recruiter, the owners of the businesses, are moving more from a transactional day-to-day muck and truck kind of workload way of running their businesses to becoming more of strategic advisors. So they need to become more of the human in the loop on these processes to make sure that at the very least they've got oversight of those processes. But also it means that there's more governance. There's more governance of what they do for their teams, for their staff, for their clients. And it just means that they are making sure that they're more empathetic in what they do, and they're part of the human side off. They're not leaving everything over to the AI to make decisions. Not least that we can't do that in a lot of cases because of EU regulation.
I think that's a really interesting point, because I think there's, for me anyway, I think the number one thing at the moment that AI should be doing for recruiters, recruitment businesses, is enabling more of that human to human piece. That if it's freeing up time, that actually that time is reinvested into being more human I think there's also lots of people that are going to lean on the AI to make the whole thing super transactional. But in terms of the disruption, I think you're absolutely right. It's the humanization piece. Okay, so and then the second thing that you said was reshaping the hiring funnel. What does that mean?
So the hiring funnel really, it's sort of a double-sided funnel really. So you've got your recruiters on one side and your candidates on the other side. Candidates can now basically automate their application processes. So they could basically go to bed at night, set their PC running and have it submit 1,000 CVs for 1,000 roles, overnight, and wake up in the morning, and then all of the job applications are there on their desk if they're successful. The other side of the funnel is where the recruiter now is bombarded by this massive amount of applications which are coming in, and so the squeeze that we see there is the fact that their role and their day-to-day activities are harder to control because maybe they don't have AI systems or workflows in place that help them manage that increase of applications. So we see this from both sides, and it just shows that there is a disparity between what's going on in the recruitment world, what's going on in the world of people who need and want to go for new jobs, because a lot of the times those guys are ahead of the curve. Even if the companies that they're working for right now have got AI policies in place and they're told that they can only use one type of AI. Copilot is a good example because it's Microsoft and they want to control their data. But there is this danger that these candidates are already more knowledgeable about the AI than the business is itself, because they are now using tools outside of that, what they call shadow AI, tools outside of the sort of required tech stack or the approved tech stack.
So what do we do about that then? Like if I'm a recruiter and I'm waking up every day or coming into the office every day to 1,000 applications, how do I deal with that? What do I do? Is there something you can help me with to screen or monitor or I don't know, combat against someone sat at home going, set up my AI to go and send 1,000 applications out for me, and for the AI to make a judgment on whether this is a potential opportunity for me or not? How do I combat against that as a recruiter?
I think there's a lot of routine tasks, in all sorts of jobs that we do, and particularly in recruitment. Those jobs that are repetitive are the types of jobs where AI can be introduced and can be used to allow us to do things at scale. So if there are 1,000 applications that are coming through, for example, if we've got the right processes in place at our end, then we can start to pass those CVs to make sure that they are hitting the right criteria for the jobs that have been applied for.
What's the risk there? Okay, I don't want to overlead this, but I worry there that the AI is making a decision that a human should be making. Like how, and maybe that's just my own ignorance of how we train an AI, but I would be fearful that I'm potentially going to miss out on a really good candidate because the AI has interpreted something incorrectly.
Yeah, it's a great point, because AIs are trained in a certain way. Their knowledge base and what they've been trained on is full of bias, and that might be to do with ethnicity, it might be to do with sex, it could be all sorts of criteria where it has this bias. And if we're not aware of that bias and we're not putting action in place to monitor for that, then we are going to have issues, because we potentially are going to be screening out the best candidate for the job just by using the AI tool. So I think it's really important that we have sight and acceptance of that, but also at the same time we've got the human in the loop that's doing the final sign-off and checking, and we're not just leaving it to the AI to say, right, we do that job and we believe what the accelerated intelligence, I don't always call it artificial intelligence, the accelerated intelligence is telling us.
So what practically what do I do then? Because I think it's maybe not quite as clear cut as this, but there's almost two camps of recruiter number one or recruitment business number one has 1,000 applications a day coming in. You go like, we haven't got time for this. AI, screen all of those and we'll call the ones that you deem good enough. And then you've got another business over here that's saying we're getting 1,000 applications a day. We need to go through all of these manually, and it becomes laborious. There must be something like this is where you come in, right? How do we get that middle ground where we're utilizing the AI and maximizing the human to do the good stuff?
So, I mean, really, we have to take a step back. So when we when we do our AI training, one of the things that we do within our workshops is start to identify the low-hanging fruit within processes. So those things which are not mission critical to the business, but at the same time can save us time when we're doing these processes. And by doing and helping our teams and giving them the ability to go and test and try these systems, that's where we can start. So it's not that the world of AI is full of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of shiny tools out there that can claim to do one thing or another. We run a directory, an apps and websites directory, and we know for a fact that if we don't, as the human, if we don't screen those tools, we know that half of them are not ethical, they don't have the right privacy policies, they've just been spun up in somebody's bedroom maybe by a developer who hasn't got the whole infrastructure of a business behind them to make them viable tools. And the same is true when you start to use those same tools in the business. So we encourage the companies to use what they've got right now and use tools which are easily accessible, but also can be locked down from a privacy point of view. So, are they using the correct version of Copilot 365? It's got a vast amount of tools within it now that can be used within a business for things like agent flows, workflows, and this kind of thing. Similarly, in the Google ecosystem, lots and lots of different tools that we can use there. And all of these platforms have a free version, but they also have a paid-for version, and the paid-for versions are going to be a lot more reliable and a lot more secure with that company's data.
This can sound really ignorant, right? But I'll ask the question anyway. If I'm a recruiter now on my desk and I do get those 1,000 applications in, is there something we can do with Copilot so that Copilot screens all of those for me and ranks them and says these are the 5 that you should call first, and this is the reasons why, and I can train Copilot not to think about sex or age or gender or whatever those other ethnicity. Is that how easy is that?
It's not easy because it needs an expert to have that oversight. So whilst the AI models have been trained on everything ever written and everything ever which was ever published on the internet, they haven't got the nuance of what an expert is in recruitment. So we need that skill set for that person to be able to come in and say and define what kind of workflow that we would have. So it's very easy to create a process, an SOP, that would manage how you would look at those CVs. And it's then, once we've got sign off and we're comfortable with that process, we then need to translate that into a workflow in AI and use agents possibly, or use some form of automation that allows us to have reliability on that process.
Okay, but it's all possible, right?
It's all possible, and there are tools, out of the box tools that will claim to do this already, and some are probably very, very good at what they do. Again, part of this AI literacy and this AI building of the knowledge and closing that knowledge gap where AI is concerned is understanding what tools are out there and how, as a business, I'd want to assess those for their suitability within my workflows.
Okay, so that brings us on really nicely into that third thing that you said is a shift, is the AI literacy piece. I get to see inside a lot of recruitment businesses, and for the most part, there's a lot of people playing about with ChatGPT, and that's it. What's your take on this AI literacy piece from what you've seen so far from the recruitment industry?
There's a big mix. So there's companies that will go all in for AI. I'm a great example of that. We've recognised that in our industry, in our traditional web development and digital marketing agency type of business, that AI is going to disrupt our industry. So we need to get ahead of the curve on that. I don't think that's the case totally in recruitment, but there are ways that we can use that knowledge to improve our processes and what we do as a business. So I think the key factors initially are to have an understanding, have a basic understanding, not just with individuals in the business, but across the business, and then help the company identify what we call AI champions within a business as well. So those people who've got, are excited about AI and what it can do for them, and are guys that can potentially lead a team or a project that might want to look at improvements in the company.
What tools or out of the box solutions, or what should we be looking at? Because I think, I mentioned there, ChatGPT seems to be everyone's go-to, and there's lots of businesses that are still using ChatGPT to go, I'm hiring for a Java developer, write me an advert, it's remote, paying £400 a day. And that's the use of ChatGPT. Or write me 6 emails that I can send to clients. What should we be using? Where should they be going? Like, what's next steps, I suppose?
I don't think there's any issues with using all sorts of tools, even if a lot of businesses might be locked down into the Microsoft ecosystem. And if they are, then they should be looking at the way that they use Copilot 365 and how they can use that not just as the little sidekick that sits within the tools like Word and Excel, but also as a platform to start using things like agents and notebooks, their Create Studio, that kind of thing as well. The big thing though is having frameworks. So if you talk to an LLM, whether it be ChatGPT, which interestingly has got somewhere in the region of 880 million users every week, which is huge. They've got the massive 75% market share, so everybody is jumping and use that. But a good proportion are not paying for it. A very large proportion are not paying for it. So they're not enjoying the full capabilities of what the latest models can do for a company. And that's the same within Copilot. With Copilot, we have the advantage that if we're paying a license, we're already being delivered the latest models within that. So we have an advantage there. There's not just a need to understand what these models can do, but how to talk to them as well. So one of the things that we've done through our own learning and development of AI software and SaaS products is to enhance the prompt that's given to the model. So we've created a CRAFT framework. So CRAFT is an acronym for context, role, action, and attributes, facts, figures, and functions, and target outcome. And that in itself is very simple. It sounds very simple, but it can be very detailed in a prompt. So by elevating our one liner that says, write me a blog post about how to recruit in this certain sector, to giving it the full context, the role, because AI can take on any role because it's been trained on every subject, and then giving it the nitty-gritty and the facts and figures and so on with a specific outcome. So, my blog article or my advert needs to be in a certain style with a certain number of words, and it needs to appeal to this audience with this call to action. Giving it all of those details within a structured prompt is going to not just give you a better output, but it's going to save you time as well. So it's going to create you more efficiency in the business. And then again, going back to 365, we have the ability to then drop those into a prompt library so that we can share those like standardized prompts across the business with our team as well.
Right.
So we're starting to get consistency in what we do now, and that again is helping with efficiency and time saving.
That's like, you just said that, like, this is our craft model, but I think that alone will be like absolute gold dust to anyone using the free or 20 quid a month version of ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it might be, right? Whatever. I think helping someone to create a proper prompt, I think, is essential and really useful. What else can recruiters do? So if I'm a recruiter listening to this, and maybe I've got a boss that doesn't want to invest in the all singing, all dancing, different tools and platforms, how would you go about advising that person to upskill themselves? Where would they start? Because I think, like, I'll just put some context around that. I find it almost overwhelming at times. So I've kind of just stuck with what I know so far. Mm-hmm. And in the call that we had, you said to me about Notebook LM, and it blew my mind. And then I've gone on this little self-development path of like trying to learn how I can implement that into my business. But yeah, what's the starting point for a recruiter, do you think?
I think for anybody approaching AI is the first important thing is to understand and appreciate that it's here to stay now. They talk about a bubble and the fact that it's going to go away. It isn't going to go away because of the massive amounts of investment that the industry is making into AI right now. So it's really important that we get a grip on what we're doing there. As a basic starting point, it's about learning the tools. And unfortunately, there is no training manual for AI. It just doesn't exist because it's just been dumped in our laps, effectively. Yeah. And one of the frustrating things as well that many business owners might find, or any general users might find, is that they got caught up in the hype a couple of years ago when ChatGPT 3.5 came to market, and it was okay, but it wasn't that good. And they also didn't know how to use it properly, because it's come from the world of coding and engineering and STEM, and that's where it's come from. Whereas people are trying to use it as a substitute for, how they might want to do a Google search, and that's not really what it's for. So I think it's, as you found, using tools like Notebook LM, which is part of the Google family of software tools, is a great starting point, because it opens up all a whole vast array of things that we can start to do with these different models.
I think the challenge there for most people, I think, is that you don't know what you don't know, and a bit like I'd never heard of it when you said it to me, and so unless there's there's somewhere that we should be going to learn about this stuff. Like, I don't know. I feel very lost and overwhelmed with all of this, and I would imagine lots of other people do too.
Yeah, this is a gap in the market that we've identified as well. When we tried to launch when we did launch our SaaS product into the market, we thought it was the next best thing, better than sliced bread. It was fantastic, because AI, from our point of view, AI is bigger than fire. It really is. It's this next thing that's coming down the road, and it's going to change everything that we do. But trying to tell people that we have this nice shiny new product that can do, customer service, technical support, HR onboarding, all of this kind of stuff, there wasn't that acceptance because there was this knowledge gap. So the understanding really is down to, if we're a business owner, it's about making sure that we as a board level are getting that level of understanding sorted out ourselves, but we're also training our staff on the basics of what's going on. And of course there's YouTube. YouTube is full of fantastic stuff, and I personally have been on this same learning curve journey, and I work with a few people in the industry to enhance what I do, because as a trainer or someone who's coming into the market to help and train people in the use of AI, I'm not an expert in everything. So I have to rely on the training of other people as well. So, people like Kyle Barmer is a great guy, very straightforward and down to earth in terms of what he talks about in AI, and also Heather Murray, also fantastic. She runs a business called AI for Non-Techers. And then what we're trying to do as Powerhouse Digital is build our skills for learning AI platform, which will be our LMS, which will do the same thing. So we've got a destination point where people can come to, and even if they don't have in-house training and the one-to-one training, that they can do on-demand training. So they can come to a platform, and some of that product will be for free.
When you go into a business then to assess like the AI literacy and get an understanding of what I need to train these people in, what's your starting point? And I get that this is a lot longer process than 5 minutes explaining to me, but typically, like, what happens there? You go into the business, what are the questions that you ask? What is it you're looking for?
Yeah, it's a great question actually, because if we don't know what we don't know, we can't start to fit the training for the organisation. So my background is in textiles, it's in manufacturing and engineering, then more latterly into the last 20 years in the digital space. It's important for us to understand what not least the pain points, but also the general understanding of where the people are on their AI journey. So we run a questionnaire. It's about a 20-point questionnaire. Takes about 10 minutes to fill out. It's called Me, My Business and AI, and it just gives you an AI, what we call an AI readiness score. And rather than a percentage, it's a bit of a barometer in terms of where you are. So are you red, amber, green? Typically, people are in that sort of amber area. Some people are moving towards the green area. And we find then that if we go into a room and we do training, that there might be one or two guys in that room in a team of sort of 20 or 30 people that are already up in terms of their understanding. But the base knowledge of the business is quite low because people aren't using it on a day-to-day. But even though they are interacting with AI every day without even knowing it. So when they're using Netflix or Amazon or they're using WhatsApp, they are using AI tools which have now been embedded into their day-to-day software so that they would be using.
So you get the 20-point questionnaire, you get your info back from there, and then that's what shapes what you're going to deliver inside that business.
Typically, so if it's foundational training, will be a mixture of understanding what the AI network or the AI ecosystem looks like. So what are LLMs? We don't go into the detail and the technicalities of that. I can't, because I'm not a techie myself, even though I run a tech business. That's for the geeks. And we find that when we talk and go too deep into the technology, people start to glaze over.
Oh, yeah, especially recruiters. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We like to keep it nice and simple. We like to give them an overview of the landscape of AI. Then we move into sort of how you would talk to an AI, and talking to an AI is like talking to a team member. It's a communication skill at the end of the day. So it can be taught and it can be learnt. So using different frameworks and different models like Craft and other ones that we have in our sort of toolkit, we can use those to help people get more out of the everyday use of these LLMs, whether it is Copilot or Gemini or Claude, for example, or Perplexity if we're using it for search.
What are the mistakes you're seeing? So once you get inside a business, and you sort of get under the bonnet, I suppose. Mm-hmm. What's the mistakes that you're seeing recruiters making or recruitment businesses making?
I think recruitment businesses, like many businesses, the big problem is the fact that they don't have a policy. So they don't have an AI policy in place. So we have GDPR policies, we have technical terms of condition and terms of service, we have privacy policies, but we don't yet have standardized AI policies. And not having those means that the business isn't really thinking about AI from the off. It's very easy then to be distracted by the new shiny thing that comes along and the hype that surrounds AI. So having and looking at and talking about this at a board level or between partners within a recruitment business is really important. So it's identifying that there is that need to have this in place, not least because your competitor might have already done this job and are already starting to move ahead of you in that AI learning curve.
I think this is one of the things that worries me. Maybe it's unfounded, but I've seen it enough times now. So just an example would be like a recruiter taking a CV, chucking it into the free version of ChatGPT and saying, identify 10 companies that I should contact about this person based on this. And I don't know what's happening to that data. But I think the policy, that makes me go, I don't think that should be happening. But because most companies, like you said, they don't have a policy, and I think it's because this thing has just been thrown upon us, mm-hmm. and like GDPR, you have to have a policy, whereas you don't yet, do you? And it's all quite new.
Candidates are protected in a certain way because there are, under the new AI EU Act, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it states and stipulates things that we should have in place as recruitment businesses. So we can't just hand over everything to a software model, particularly if we're not telling the candidate that that's what we're going to be doing. Similarly, within HR departments and areas within a business where we're talking about individuals within a company, if we're using a tool that might record and transcribe our conversation, then we need to be mindful of data access requests by that individual that we're talking about, because again, that conversation now is held in another tool somewhere, in another piece of in a data silo, and we need to have policies and procedures in place in terms of how to access that and give that information back to that requester.
There's not been a test case on any of this yet, is there? And I think it's an interesting one, because anyone listening to this, or lots of people will know, like the AWR was like a big thing, and I think lots of people maybe didn't pay the attention it deserved until there was a first test case where someone challenged it. And maybe that's what we need here to really shake people into action, is for someone to be taken to task. What are the other mistakes? You mentioned earlier about people using AI as a search engine. Is that a mistake? Is that one of the things?
I think it's very good at that, but we have to remember that AIs make mistakes. So if you're on a free version of ChatGPT, we're possibly going to be not getting the best responses out of it, because it's either not trained on the latest data or trained in a way that's going to give us the best responses. And also it may not be the best AI tool to do that research job. We might not have it in research mode, or we might not be using Perplexity, which is another search engine that we could be used, which is going to do that job in a much better way. So just by blindly going in and playing with these tools, yes, you should do that, and I don't advocate not doing that, but these are very, very intelligent pieces of software, algorithms that have been put together and can do very, very clever things with our data and our queries, if they're prompted and structured in the right way, or the workflows are structured in the right way. I guess it's a mistake. We need to get into that. And again, we need to have plans in place that say that, look, I'm going to look at this process within my business and see where we can make improvements. And by doing so, I'm going to increase my knowledge of how and what we can do with an AI tool.
Can I just chuck some examples at you? So if I go back 10 years and I think about how I would have used a search engine as a recruiter, there's a few things that spring to mind. One of them might be, so I might do something on predictions for market growth in the next 12 months, right? It's the new financial year coming up, I'm doing my plan. I'd go to Google and I'd root around, but I might put something like that into the search engine of growth predictions in the biotech market for 2026. Which AI tool would I use, and how would I prompt it to get better information quicker than what I would have found through Google 10 years ago?
Again, depending on the LLM that's being used, we've already talked about Notebook LM. Notebook LM is a workspace essentially where you could load in lots of documents and PDFs, research, information, and then start to interrogate that data within that notebook. You can do a similar thing within Gemini, and you can switch on research mode, and it can then go off to the web and it can start to pull that information back for you. They call it deep research. It takes longer in terms of its response because it's doing more in the background. And it just means that then it's giving you a more sort of factual response. So it's maybe citing 20 or 30 different places where it's gone to get that information. And similarly within Microsoft 365 and Claude actually, there are tools where we can use the research agent or the research capability to give us that, what traditionally might have just been a bland Tell me 20 answers, please.
So do you know what? And that made me think there, because I've definitely ran this search years ago. 10 years ago, I would have gone to Google and said, give me 25 engineering consultancies in Manchester, and that's going to start to be my target list. Again, what would be a good tool to use? What's the prompt that I'd use? How do I use AI instead?
So here we'd
to map a market, I suppose, is what we'd call that, right?
Okay, so we'd want to create a project. So within the different LLMs, there's the ability to create a project, which is a folder effectively for our work we're doing on that particular thing. What we can do in the background of these LLMs, particularly on paid accounts, is start to set up the way we want the LLM to behave, and also give it background and context to what we do as a job and the type of industry that we might be working in. So things like setting base system prompts effectively that tell the LLM, this is how I like to be spoken back to, these are the things not to include in the way that you talk back to me. So don't include the M dashes, don't include Zs because we speak UK English. These kind of things, we can put them into the prompt in the background, and then again within a project we can start to manage that structure as well. And then by using a more structured prompt that gives context for what we're doing, gives it the role of the AI and the role that we want it to take on in that particular instance, giving it all of the factual information, the nitty-gritty stuff, the way we want it to quiz us. Because the other thing that we can do with AI is ask it to keep asking us qualifying questions and using it as a training coach as well. So that one prompt can be the start of an interaction and a whole process of ideas that then give you the output that you're looking for. Yeah,
I love that. Someone mentioned this to me a couple of years ago, and I've used it ever since. On every single prompt, I end it with, ask me 5 questions to get us started.
Yeah.
And the output that I get is significantly improved from if you just give it a basic prompt, right?
Yeah, because it's all about improving the prompt. Everything starts with a good prompt. And the more you can improve that, the better context that you can give, the better output that you're going to receive.
Is that another one of the mistakes then that you see? So when we talk about the mistakes that recruiters are making, we talk about like they're using it as a search engine and no policy, but is that something just not being able to write a decent prompt? Well, they will do now because you just shared your model, but...
yeah, and we want everybody to be able to use models like this because, we want them to have a way to get good output and use these tools. And it's a good stepping stone to get into the use of the AI, because if they get good results from using that style of prompt and that framework, they can use it at every level in their interaction with the LLMs going forward. Whether it's for something that's quite basic about, create me a blog article or a social media plan for the next 6 months, to, how do I restructure going after this particular market, and how do I restructure my business? Let's start to work with it as a thought partner that says, right, we're going to really go deep on this. But again, starting with a really structured prompt can do that. And the mistake, I guess, is that they don't know that there is this better way to talk to the AI.
What do you think the next 12 months are going to look like? And I realise you haven't got a crystal ball. I think AI is creating so much uncertainty inside, not just recruitment businesses, I think in businesses generally. How do you see the next 12 months playing out?
A great question. And I don't have a crystal ball, but I am quite close to the market. And I was in London last week at the tech show. That's one of the busiest shows that I've been to in a long, long time across all of the different industries that I've worked in. I think it's really encouraging that there's a buzz out there. There is this upsurge now of acceptance of AI in the market. And I think if we're going to see a big step change, I think it's going to be the fact that people start to understand how to use these tools as part of their day-to-day processes. That'll have advantages and disadvantages. And the disadvantage might be that, the role that we were giving to a new recruit, an intern in the business, now can be done by an AI, and that role is no longer required. But the upside is that people with experience in the market, in their particular vertical or within their channel, can now use these tools as an augmentation to what they do, as a really intelligent sidekick. They reckon that when ChatGPT 3.5 came to the market, it had the educational age of a 12-year-old. The current models, the 5.4 GPT 5.4, and the Claude models, we're now talking at PhD level and beyond. And I think that if we're going to see a change in the market, we're going to see that knowledge going even higher. And then what we're also seeing is this convergence of the tools. So some of the Claude tools and technology now is being used within the Microsoft system because it's very clever at doing the coding side of things, and that's not the case within Microsoft. So we'll see that convergence, and we'll see the growth of agents, essentially. And agents are little instruction sets that do certain little tasks. But when we put them together, they're going to be much more powerful. And I think as people start to get more AI literate, they'll understand that these tools can be an advantage, and they'll understand how to use them, how to knit them all together for the outcome. And I think that's where we're going to start to see some exciting step change going forward.
It's uncertain times, but it's very exciting times. I could keep talking about this all day to you. Like I say to everyone in any training that I deliver, is like, ask yourself, how do I apply this to my world? And the whole time that we've been speaking, we've been talking about it from a recruitment perspective, but I can't help but think, like, how do I apply this to my business and what we do, and how can it help me, I suppose, really selfishly. But there'll be lots of people listening to this that think, do you know what, I think you could really help my business. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So my website is powerhouse-digital.com. There we showcase things like the craft framework and some of the training programs that we have. I'm also on LinkedIn, so Tim S. Bennett on LinkedIn. You can find me there. And one of the things that all of your audience could do for free, though, as a takeaway, is just start to spend half an hour a day of their time over a coffee or on their phone, just instead of doing the doom scrolling. Yeah. Let's have a look at some of the capabilities of AI. Try things, give them one or two complicated tasks to do, and see what kind of output comes back. Because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the outcome there. And if we're spending that hour a day, which then is going to grow over time, and we're going to have that commitment to learning and understanding this new thing that's coming down the line, then we're going to be in a good place for what's coming in the future.
Oh gosh, yeah, the compound effect of an hour a day is absolutely huge, isn't it? Over the space of a year, yeah. And then you say, well, we're a 10-person business and we're all going to invest that amount of time. I think your levels of literacy in all things AI would be enormous in 12 months' time. Tim, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jimmy. It's been great to chat.